Hello and welcome to the Path to Publishing webinar. I am Carrie Ray Barnum. I'm the Executive Director of New Shelves Books, and I am so pleased today to introduce my good friend, Annalisa Parent. Annalisa is a writing coach. She is an author, and she is also a publishing CEO because she wears all the hats in the publishing industry. She owns and operates Date with the Muse, my goodness, which helps storytellers to publish traditionally at the highest level possible. Annalisa is basically the book guru. When you need help finishing your story or really making sure that you have the best query letter or that you've smoothed out all the difficulties of writing, Annalisa is the person that we go to. And she also is the author of Storytelling for Pantsers, How to Outline and Revise Your Novel Without an Outline. And she was featured on The Creative Life with Cheryl Borden on PBS. She writes for local, national, and international publications. She just does all the things. And I can't even be jealous because she's also funny and she's also very relatable. We are so excited to have you here today, Annalisa. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your information with us to talk about the different ways that we can publish a book, the ways to get there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Carrie, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm really happy to speak on this topic. So let's see if the technology will work for us. Paths to publication. So I speak at writing conferences all around the world. And one of the questions that I get asked most frequently is, what's the best way to publish? And that's a well-meaning question, but it's much more complicated than it might seem on the surface. So there isn't any best way to publish per se, but there is a best way to publish for what you're trying to do with your project. So what we're going to talk about today are the pros and cons of the three main ways of publication. And that might surprise you that I said three. Most people know about the main two, but they forget one. So the three main ways of publication that we're going to talk about today are traditional. Most people know about that one. Self-publishing. Most people know about that one. And hybrid publishing. So what I'm going to do today is just walk you through the pros and the cons of each to help you to get to a position where you can make a smart decision for yourself on what is the best way for you to publish this particular project. So hopefully that makes sense, and we're going to move forward and jump right in. So as I said, here are our three main ways of publication. Traditional publishing, those are pretty much all the books on your bookshelf. You've seen them before. It's been around for quite a while now. Traditional publishing, people think about things like Simon and Schuster, for example, as a traditional publisher. Self-publishing, pretty self-explanatory. It's you yourself. And hybrid, we're going to dig into what that means today and what the difference is between vanity publishing and hybrid publishing. So let's start with traditional publishing. As I said, most of us are familiar with this. In its current form, it's been around since about the mid-19th century. And that is to say, you know, writers present books to the publisher accepts or doesn't accept, then publishes on the writer's behalf and sells it. And that, of course, is a simplification. It's a lot more complicated these days than it was in the 1850s, but that's the basic breakdown of how traditional publishing works. So what's good about traditional publication? What are some of the benefits? Well, for many writers, they want the validation that they're part of something, that they've been accepted by a long-standing tradition. For a lot of people, it can mean a lot, not just to see their name on the cover of a book, but on a book that's been vetted by professionals, that's been published by a big house that might feel good to them. So if validation is important to you, then traditional publishing might be the way to go. What else is great about traditional publishing? Well, you've got easier distribution. We're going to dig into that a little bit when we talk about self-publishing. Most writers don't know this because it's a little bit behind the scenes. And if you've never published a book before, you wouldn't see how your book gets out into the world. So we've all been on a highway. We've seen the big furniture trucks drive by, the big chips trucks drive by. That's distribution, how your book or your potato chips get from here to there. And it's very important that your book be distributed to various places around the world. If your book isn't available in Saskatchewan or Kansas City, people there aren't going to be able to buy it, of course. And so big publishing houses can get you big distribution. With most publishing houses, your book is available anywhere in the world at any time. And that's a huge advantage. You also don't have to worry about that distribution. They take care of it. What else is great about traditional publishing? Well, when you traditionally publish, you've got a professional team behind you. These are people who have been trained, have been hired to do one job and one job only, whether that job is PR or marketing or layout, cover design, any of the jobs that are required to make a book happen. These people are professionals. They've been trained. They know what they're doing. You don't have to worry about their qualifications. Also, in traditional publishing, there are no upfront costs. In fact, in general, it should happen that the publisher pays you in advance. So sometimes that might be $1,000. It could be $10,000. If you're super famous, it might be $100,000. Or if you've got a really amazing idea that they want to sell. But the point is that you're generally getting paid upfront, not paying upfront. Another financial question that comes up with traditional publishing is that the publisher is taking on the financial risk of this publishing endeavor. So if your book totally flops, we hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, it's not money coming out of your pocket. It's money that's been fronted by the publishing house, and they're taking that risk. What else? In traditional publishing, you're going to work generally with your literary agent to negotiate rights. So another thing that most authors don't know about is how many rights there are. They kind of think, well, I'm going to give them my book and they're going to publish my book and things are going to be great. But there are lots of rights that have to do with how the book is published. So ebook rights, audiobook rights, sometimes even film or television rights. So that's kind of the how that you're going to negotiate. And in traditional publishing houses, they've got a lot of leverage to make amazing things happen with sales on ebooks or audiobooks, or to have a partnership with a production company that maybe makes movies from their books just as part of the way they do things. So there's a lot of room for leverage there. The other kind of rights that we're thinking about are language rights. So is your book going to be published in German and French and who knows what else? And where is it going to be published? So is it just going to be published in North America? Is it going to also be published in Europe or Asia? There are some language and geographic rights as well. Your publishing house is really going to be able to leverage those multiple rights for you and get you a pretty good deal. Now, your literary agent is there to act as intermediary to make sure that they're not taking advantage. And certainly on my author's behalf, I have helped my authors. I'm not a literary agent, but I've helped them to negotiate a much better deal than the publishing house originally proposed. All right, so that's some really great things about traditional publishing. What doesn't work about traditional publishing for some authors? Well, it is slow. So the books that you see that are new releases that just came out this week at your local bookstore were acquired by the publishing house at least 2 years ago. So it takes a long time, unless you're like, you know, right now it would be like Will Smith wanting to write about the slap at the Oscars. Like, that book's going to come out next week. They're going to rush order that because it's timely and everybody's talking about it right this second. Otherwise, It's very slow. It takes a long time to come out. And, you know, there's a method to their madness. They want to make sure, I mean, quite literally, that all of their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed and that everything is where it should be, that your book is professionally packaged, that they've put together a PR campaign that works and gets your name out, and that they've assisted you in marketing and creating a plan that gets you out there. Another disadvantage for some authors when they think about traditional publishing is the lack of creative control. So what does that mean for you? The interior of your book is going to be formatted in a way you don't know what it's going to look like. Are you going to like it? Is it going to be a font that you don't care for? Or your chapter heading is going to be ugly? You don't have any choice on that. And you're also not going to have a lot of choice on your cover. You know, they may put an image on that cover that you just don't like, you don't think it goes with your book, but they're doing it for consistency in genre, consistency in branding. They're doing the market research to know what's appealing to an audience. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to like it. Now, this is particularly important for picture book authors, where the visual aspect is such a huge part of the book, because typically the author of a picture book isn't going to have any say on the illustrator. So I know many picture book authors who actually aren't really happy with their book because their vision for what the illustrations would look like is not at all what was executed. So if you're a picture book author, that's a consideration. Are you okay with not having any choice about what your illustrations look like? Last disadvantage for traditional publication is that, especially if you're a first-time author, you're going to get very little marketing support. And that sounds a little upside down when people hear about it the first time, but it makes a lot of sense if you put on your publishing house hat. So the Stephen Kings and the J.K. Rowlings of the world, they know that these people are going to sell books. You know, if you're Stephen King and you write your name on a piece of toilet paper, it's going to become a bestseller just because you're Stephen King. You know, for debut authors, you're an unknown entity in the marketplace. Is your book going to sell? They don't know. And so ironically, they're not going to put a lot of marketing dollars behind your name because they don't know if you're going to sell. That means that you're going to be responsible for a lot of marketing. Now, let's be honest, no matter what, you're going to be responsible for marketing. So don't think that you're off the hook for that. You know, Stephen King is still doing radio interviews, television interviews. So is J.K. Rowling, Dan Brown. I mean, pick your popular author. They still have work to do. But if you're a debut author and it's your first time publishing, you're going to have extra work to do. They're not going to give you as much support. They're not going to put as much money behind you. So that's traditional publishing in a nutshell. Let's move on to self-publishing. So self-publishing is exactly what it sounds like, you yourself publishing. One of the great things about living in the digital age is the democratization of publication. So not too long ago, it was the case that you could write a book and it would never get published because there was a gate. And if you couldn't get through the gate, then you didn't get published. Today, that's not true. We have lots of tools at our disposal to publish books, even if they're not accepted by the traditional publishing establishment, or maybe we just want to circumvent it entirely because of what our goals are for the process. So what's great about self-publishing? Well, you have total creative control. I talked in traditional publication about how they're going to choose your cover, your interior design, etc. Here, you can decide. You want a unicorn on the cover? You got it. You want a unicorn on the back? You got it. You want rainbows and puppies? They're yours. Whatever it is that you want to have, you have total creative control. You want to do something wonky and print upside down? I mean, the sky's the limit on what you can do. You get to call the shots and make all the decisions. Now, in terms of feelings, we talked about validation over in traditional publication. I would say that the balance to that in self-publishing is the empowerment. So here you get to make the decisions, right? So some authors find that really empowering. They're making all of the decisions. They get to decide, you know, puppies, rainbows, unicorns, pink, blue, whatever it is you like. Those are your decisions. You're in control. And for some writers, that's really important to have that empowerment, to have that control. Let's talk about money. In traditional publication, in self-publication, there's the possibility, note that I said the possibility, for more money. Now, the traditional publishing house has more leverage to sell more books, but in self-publishing, you're typically going to get more money per book. So apples to apples, if you sell 100 books in traditional publishing versus self-publishing, you're going to get more in your pocket with the self-publishing. But then let's weigh that against, typically the traditional publishing house simply has more leverage to get more books into the marketplace. All they have to do is pick up the phone and call Barnes and Noble or wherever and, you know, get your book in bulk. So there's a trade-off there, but it is true that in self-publishing, you're going to get a greater percentage of the revenue from your book than you will get in a typical traditional publishing contract. What else? In self-publishing, you retain the rights. So when you sign with a traditional publishing house, you're signing over your rights. You don't get to decide anymore what it looks like. You don't get to decide anymore where it's distributed. You're giving away some of your rights in that contract. When you self-publish, you call the shots. You make all of the decisions. You can decide if you have a film deal. Then again, you have to go try and negotiate that. And I don't know if you know any Hollywood directors, it can be a little bit challenging. So, you know, trade-offs on both sides. Also in self-publishing, it is the anomaly. However, it can be a real launching pad to the kind of success that many writers aspire to. So, for example, 50 Shades of Grey started out, well, it started out as a blog, but it eventually became a self-published endeavor. It was picked up and franchised, and now, I mean, I can say 50 Shades of Grey. Some of you maybe smile, some of you maybe groan, but we all pretty much know what it is. We've seen that it became a series of movies. I think that that's the kind of success that many of us would be very happy to have. You have to be discovered. It doesn't happen for everyone, but it is a possibility in the self-publishing realm. And the way that it happened for 50 Shades of Grey and many other similar types of projects is that it became so popular, it had a grassroots popularity, that someone with more money, with more leverage, became interested in that property and acquired it and made a whole lot more money with it. And I think, you know, again, we'd all like to be in a position where we've got that kind of a book deal, that kind of a movie deal, and that kind of revenue. So what are the downsides of self-publishing? Well, you're all alone. You're by yourself. So I don't know about you, but do you know about interior layout? Do you know how to upload a book? Do you know what the important elements are on a cover? Do you know what kind of metadata you need? There are a million things that you're going to have to learn doing it by yourself. You're essentially either going to have to become an expert in things like fonts, or you're going to have to hire somebody. And I mean, we've all hired a plumber or somebody to fix the car and have it go wrong, right? Because you didn't know what an elbow joint was, or, you know, whether the alternator should X or Y. You're not an expert on those things when you're hiring somebody else to do them. The same is true here. You know, do you know enough to hire somebody who's going to be reliable and give you the kind of cover you need, who's going to be able to give you distribution that you need? There's a lot of research and time that's taken that you're doing all on your own without somebody behind you. This is one of the huge disadvantages of self-publishing. And if I could have like a yellow flag to wave, it would be this. Many authors go into self-publishing because it looks cheap, and it ends up being more expensive. So it looks cheap because, you know, you think, oh, look, this person's going to make a cover for me and it's only $100. And then this person's going to do interior design. It's only $200. And then this person's going to, and this person, and pretty soon we're, you know, at 5,000. Now we're at 6,000. It looked like it was only going to be a couple $100, and now we're up in the thousands, sometimes into the tens of thousands, and people still don't have a book, or they don't have a book that actually sells for them. So that's just a caution, something to think about. On the surface, it often looks like it's not going to be very costly, but ends up being quite costly. Another disadvantage is that it's very difficult for self-published books to get into bookstores and libraries. It's not impossible. Certainly Carrie is an expert on that, but it is more difficult. Typically, for your average author with a self-published book, if you go a knocking on your local library's door, on your local bookstore's door, the answer is going to be no. And the reason is that these librarians, these bookshop owners, they just don't have the time to vet your self-published book. Whereas they can look in catalogs of established books that are coming from publishing houses and know that this is something that will sell, that their readers will want to take out of the library without having to do the research. And unfortunately, there are many, many people who have come before us who were a little bit more sloppy than they should have been and gave self-publishing a bad name. And so, you know, that doesn't mean that all self-published books are bad. It just means that there is a reputation out there, and the librarian or the bookshop owner may not be willing to take the time to see that you've got a viable product. So it's just a little bit more difficult. In general, for self-published books, there are no literary prizes available. So typically your big name literary prizes in your genre are going to go to traditionally published books that have been vetted by some editors who know, in general, what is going to work, what's going to be viable, what readers are going to like in the marketplace. Are they always 100% right? No, of course they're not, but this is the system that exists as it is, and therefore the prizes are typically awarded to these established books that are coming from traditional publishing houses. Again, there are some prizes available for self-published books, but they're not as prestigious yet, and they don't carry the cash prizes that the bigger awards do. Lastly, in terms of quality control for self-publishing, if you're doing it yourself and you don't know what the publishing industry standards are, then you might miss out on some really important elements that are things that prize committees, libraries, bookstores, and readers are looking for. So definitely want to be thinking about quality control if you're looking to do it by yourself. All right, let's talk about hybrid. And I promised you that we talk about the difference between hybrid and vanity. So some people use them interchangeably, and that's where things get confusing. And for others, it's different things. So when we talk about hybrid, here's the bottom line. When you're hybrid publishing, you are paying to be published. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but I call hybrid publishing the wild, wild west. And that's part of why we end up getting vanity publishing in there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about the cons. But the bottom line of what is hybrid publishing, you pay to have your book published, bottom line. All right, so what's good about hybrid publishing? Well, in my mind, hybrid publishing is the best of both worlds. So over in self-publishing, we talked about the lack of creative control. In traditional publishing, my goodness, in traditional publishing, we talked about the lack of creative control. In self-publishing, free for all, like, what am I going to do? What color is the best? How do I know? You see this a lot in writing groups. Which cover is the best? How do people know? They're not marketing experts. Here, you're getting the best of both worlds. So if you've got a good publishing house, and I'm going to keep stressing this over and over again, you've got the marketing support to help you decide not only, what do you like, what's pleasing to you, what is illustrating the concepts that your book is attempting to communicate, but also what is appealing in the marketplace. What are readers expecting in this genre? What are they going to buy in this genre? Just as a really quick example, if you're trying to write commercial women's fiction and your cover is black, probably not going to fly. If you're writing horror and your cover is pink, probably not going to fly. How do you know these things? Well, you probably don't. And so having a team behind you to bring that information to you is really helpful. In hybrid publishing, you get a better cut than traditional publishing. Now, it's not as good as self-publishing, but again, we're balancing that with better leverage. And if you've got a good house, remember I told you I was going to emphasize that again and again, then you're getting the leverage that you need with a better cut. That's, in my mind, a really good intersection of good money. Lastly, a good publishing house is going to be a one-stop shop. So you give over the manuscript and they have a professional team behind them who is able to do a professional job of all of the elements that are required, the metadata, the back cover, front cover, spine, book design, interior, exterior, ebook, layout, EPUB. I mean, there are just a million considerations and they're able to do all of those. And you don't have to worry about what are all of those things other than to say, yes, I like that. That works for me. So disadvantages. I said it was the wild, wild west. So hybrid publishing has gotten a bad name called vanity presses because there are a lot of presses out there that have taken advantage of authors. They charge them a lot of money and deliver very little. Or one of my favorite ploys, they promise marketing. And what that means is they're going to send you some bookmarks. That is not marketing, people. That's sending you some bookmarks. So it's really, 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 really important if you're going to do hybrid publishing that you know what it is that you're getting. How are they going to market you? Putting your book on their website, also not marketing. I mean, technically marketing, but hello, unless they're getting 10,000 visitors a day, you're not going to see any traction on that book. So what is it that you're getting? Now, part of the problem here is that there's no oversight on these hybrid publishing houses. There are technically rules, but that doesn't mean that all of the publishing houses are following them because there are no police to come and say, hey, you're not following the rules. So they can do whatever the heck they want, take people's money and run. So it's really, really, really important if you're working with a hybrid house that you understand what it is that you're getting. If they're just going to give you a book, then you're just as well off self-publishing because they're basically glorified self-publishing. And here's one of my favorite scams, and I love pulling back the curtain on this one. They're going to promise to make you a bestseller. So here's how this works. Love this scam. So over in the Dewey Decimal System, remember that in the library, we've only got so many categories, right? A book can only go in certain places. We can't invent new categories. It's fixed. So you would think over on Amazon that the same kind of system applies. It is not the case. Over on Amazon, it's a free-for-all. So, you might have historical fiction as a category. That makes sense to us, right? Cookbooks, that's a category. That makes sense to us. We would expect in the Dewey Decimal System to be able to find those things. But no, over on Amazon, you can also do things like this. Books with blue covers. Now, nobody searches, I hope, for books to read based on books with blue covers, but you can basically create any category you want. So here's what I do to become a bestseller. I list my book as book with blue cover. And then I call my mom and I call my best friend and I call my neighbor and all three of them buy my book. Now I've sold 3 books in the category of books with blue covers. And I am the bestseller in the books with blue covers category. Yay! I'm a best-selling author. I just sold 3 books. I'm not a best-selling author. So that's the trick. So if they're claiming to make you a bestseller, I want you to think long and hard about what kind of bestseller you want to be. Because what they're playing off of is the New York Times bestselling authors. Over there, you have to sell 30,000 copies. I think that's a number that many of us would like to sell, right? We'd be pretty happy with that number. We'd be pretty happy with that readership. We'd be pretty happy with that revenue. That's a bestseller in my mind. Selling 3 books to people you already know, not really a goal for most writers, if we're honest, right? So if it's important to you to be able to say that you're a bestseller and you like perfect attendance awards, then that's your thing. But what I find for most authors is they actually want to sell books. They actually want to share their message with the world and meet people and, also, make a living at this thing called writing. So don't fall into the bestseller trap. Don't fall into hybrid houses helping you to just self-publish when you could have done that on your own. Don't fall into just getting you a book without any marketing or sales support. Know what it is that you're getting. Also, many hybrid houses will take money on both ends. So they'll charge you an amount to publish the book, and then they'll take the lion's share of the revenue on your book sales. Well, that's not fair, right? It's sort of one or the other. Now, they are going to take a cut because there are fees to publish a book, to keep it listed, all of that. But they shouldn't be taking, 80% and you get, the measly 10% that's left after Amazon and everybody else gets their cut. So hybrid can work really well. It can absolutely be a best of both worlds scenario. I'm a little bit biased because I run a hybrid publishing house, and it disgusts me that people act unethically. But I also, have had many an author in tears on the phone because they've fallen for some of the scams. And that's why I shared them with you today. Please don't fall for those. So I started out with that most important question. People come to me and they say, what's the best way to publish? Well, hopefully by now you've seen there's not necessarily a best way to publish per se in general for every single writer out there, but there's a best way for you. So what can you think about in order to make that decision? What are your goals? What are you trying to do with your book? And which form of publishing is most likely to get me there? So we're going to open it up for Q&A. I'm really open for any questions that have to do, in general, that are going to apply to anybody who might be on this call. If you've got questions about your individual situation, your book, what actually is it X or Y, which one's best for me? I'm super happy to chat with you about that. This is a free consultation. You can book yourself right into my calendar through datewiththemuse.com/book-a-call. If you're thinking about that and that's tempting, I would jump on that now because they tend to fill up really quickly when I do something like this. So go ahead and do that. If you have, if you want to take a deep dive into your book, your situation, what might work best for you, happy to do that for anybody here. I love Carrie and new shelves, so happy to do that. Otherwise, if you've got general questions that will apply to anybody, I'm happy to take those now. And Carrie, I'll let you lead the charge on that.
I will do that. Thank you so much for that, Annalisa. And those of you who've been around New Shelves for a while, you will definitely agree that these are a lot of things that that I talk about that have been long-standing, that this is not news, it is updated, it is informational, but I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm sitting here over here going, oh yeah, well, she should talk about, oh, she covered that point. Okay, then. So I think that was fantastic. We do have a question. For hybrid publishing, what's a reasonable amount a writer can expect to pay for services?
That's a really great question. And I will preface that with, you get what you pay for. So I've seen contracts at $5,000. I've seen contracts at $80,000. What are you getting for the amount of money that you're paying? At $80,000, you most certainly should be on national television. So look at what it is that you're getting, but also before you go into it, know what it is that you want. Because if you're looking to be on national television, then you should be expecting a price that looks like $80,000. If you just want a book, and you want to hand it out to your friends, well, then we're talking about, the low thousands at that point. But absolute clarity on what you want is going to help you to get to a price point that feels reasonable to you.
Right. And I would also add that it's really important as you are looking at pricing that you are paying for someone's time and expertise. So that is really important to note. If you are wanting someone who knows exactly what it looks like to professionally publish, they know the trends and covers, that takes a lot of time and everyone likes to get paid. I often say, of course I work for hire and I get paid because my kids like to eat a lot. So it is important that you do keep that in mind, that it is, could you do it cheaper yourself? Absolutely. If you decide to self-publish, you can, but that means you've got to invest a lot of time to make sure that you are on point, on trend. Can you format a book? Sure. Are you going to take the time to learn not only how to format a book, but also how to format it well? That's a whole different story. Could I format a book? Yes. Does anyone want me to, including me? No, absolutely not. All right, we had an emailed in question for someone who could not join us live, I believe. And the question was, a few years ago, I wrote a rhyming children's bedtime book aimed at 2 to 5-year-olds. And for the last 3 years, I've been stumped on how to move it forward. I've reached out to so many agencies that were accepting unsolicited manuscripts and didn't get any bites, and I haven't gone down the agent route yet. I have two main concerns. Firstly, the story is complete, but I don't have illustrations yet. And secondly, I'm unsure whether to pursue the traditional publishing route or give in and go down the self-publishing aisle. What are your thoughts on this?
Ooh, there's a lot to unpack there. I like it. Okay. So if you're traditionally publishing a picture book and you are not an artist, you should not have illustrations. Please do not do that. Publishing houses want to choose their own illustrations, their own, or illustrators, their own known entities. So that's sort of the first thing. So now the question is, which route should I take? So, sorry. I'm going to close the chat window because that was distracting. So when you're thinking about picture books, here's the thing. Unless you're Madonna, or I don't know, Justin Timberlake, whoever is publishing a celebrity picture book this week, rhyming it's not going to fly. It has to be so exceptional that the publishing house can't help but take it because it's funny or quirky, or there's something that just really makes it like an A+++++++ that they would take it, because otherwise it's just, we all read Dr. Seuss. It worked at a certain time, but it's not what's selling now. So it's really, really rare that you're going to find a rhyming picture book traditionally published now. So that's a consideration where you can say, well, I can either switch it up. It doesn't have to be rhyming, or I'm really committed to this and I want this book to come out the way that it is, in which case you're self-publishing, and you do get to pick your own illustrator. So that's the good news there.
Right. And I think it's also important to note that when you submit children's books manuscripts, they aren't typically looking for you to have illustrations. I know that comes up a lot. That most publishing houses have their own illustrators that they like to work with the style and the brand. It's much like a cover designer. So don't let that keep you from submitting, because they're not expecting you to be an artist as well as a writer. Now you can be, and you can sometimes pitch it that way, but it's not in any way expected that way.
Right.
All right. And so we have questions about, you obviously own a publishing company. So what is kind of the standard of when you publish a book, what steps do you go through? Do you actually work on editing with authors? Is that like a thing people should expect as far as editing and cover design? If they're working with a publisher or hybrid publisher, what kind of services or product should a author expect?
Yeah, and I mean, this is where that Wild Wild West thing comes in, because it really could be anything, right? You're hungry, you're just going to stop at the next place on the side of the road. What are you going to get? We don't know. Probably food. So it's that kind of a thing. What do I do? We're really a soup to nuts. So I say idea to sold. So we help with all aspects. So if you come in with an idea, you've got coaches that can help you to flesh out your idea and make a book. You've already got a manuscript, it needs editing, we can edit it for you. We do all forms of publishing. So we do print book in both soft and hardcover, ebook and audiobook. And we also do a whole lot of marketing work with your friend and mine, Carrie. And so she's helped us to get folks into libraries, airports. I mean, you name it, we've pretty much done it. I don't think we've done skywriting yet, Carrie, but we may do that.
Oh, idea.
And then we've got a full PR team too. So when we talk about getting people on national television, have we done it? Yes. Have we gotten affiliations with major publishers? Absolutely, yes. We're very dedicated to a bespoke kind of publishing. So we really start with, what do you want this book to do for you? And we build that.
Yeah, which I think is really important, is it's always about your goals. Because as Annalisa said, the price will reflect what your goals and what you want out of it. If you want a full PR campaign, it's not going to be $500. So you guys know typical PR campaigns, if you go to a PR company on the lower end, they start around $3,000 a month. So I mean, it adds up. And PR, also keep in mind, is not, it overlaps with marketing, but it's not marketing. PR means that you're getting your name, your book out there. It does not mean that you are actually running ads and asking for a sale. So it's important to realize that there are so many different facets of what go into publishing. And we hear this all the time, right? Authors are like, I just want to write. I don't want to market my book. Well, if you want it to sell, you want to market your book. And so no matter what it is, whether you're J.K. Rowling or if you're someone else along those lines, or if you're self-publishing, you do have to take a real interest in your own marketing. But there are certainly people and companies that can help get you there, that can support you, that can connect you to the right people. And in my experience, that is absolutely what Annalisa does, is that there are things, certainly she can't be an expert at everything. Um,
You can try real
but
hard.
right. I mean, she comes really close, but then she has these connections. And that is kind of the thing, is that when she needs marketing help, she comes to me. When I'm like, hey, Annalisa, I have a question about a query letter. These are the type of things that having the right connections are sometimes what makes the difference. So and I do think it's really important too that one of Annalisa's strong points is really making sure that a book is well written and well edited. That is probably the number one complaint that we see about self-published books, is that it's not well written, or that it's not well edited, improved. And that is something, when you're working with a company, that makes a huge difference, is if that company or that publisher, that hybrid, gives you the tools to make sure that you have a well-edited book, it makes a huge difference, because you can't come back from that. When you've got reviews up on Amazon that say this book is awfully written, or it's got editing errors right and left, you can never get rid of those. Even if you fix those errors, that's, it's like a bad social media post that's going to follow you around for quite a few years. All right, we had another question about children's books, and this was, if I do decide to self-publish my own children's book so I can have more creative say in the illustrations, how does that work? How do I find an illustrator, and how do I pay them?
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I mean, I think that there are probably as many answers out there as there are authors and illustrators. You know, how do you find an illustrator? I know that people have used some of those sites like Fiverr and that kind of thing. You know, wherever you find your person, it's not only about making sure you like their art. This is going to be slightly controversial, but artists aren't always good at meeting deadlines. So you want to make sure that this person, and I mean, this has happened for us with illustrators in the past, you know, they're creatives and they're very dedicated to their art. You want to make sure that they can meet a deadline. I would say that that's the most important aspect, because if they put your production behind, you're just not going to be happy, even if you're doing it on your own. And then, you know, there are lots of different models for how illustrators get paid. Sometimes the author will offer a portion of revenue on the book. That might seem really good up front, but it can get really messy on the back end. So I would recommend paying that person a flat fee and offering to give them credit on the book, as you see on all picture books, you know, words by and text by and illustrations by. And leave it at that. And whatever flat fee the two of you negotiate and feels fair to both of you, you know, it could be $500, it could be $5,000, but, you know, I don't know what the artist and you would work out. But those are my recommendations, to really stay with the flat fee and not mess around with revenue from the book.
Yeah, I agree. That can get really messy having to pay out royalties. It makes your taxes harder to do. It's a big can of worms. And big publishers are set up to do that. They are set up to pay out royalties. So it's a little bit different. But when you yourself are doing it, it's one more job that you have to take care of. So I agree. And a question on, again, we must have a lot of children's books authors on today, is for picture books, should you research publishers to see what illustration styles they are using so that you can match expectations? So I think that's probably if you're doing your own illustrations or if you're self-publishing, should you go and research what's currently trending so you can kind of match that same feel?
You know, I am not a children's book expert. I mean, certainly I have worked with many a picture book. I've published a picture book on my own through a publishing house. So my impression of how this works is that the publishing house doesn't have a style per se. A series might have a style, right? So really obvious one, the Berenstain Bears, right? All those books look the same. Dr. Seuss, his illustrations are always wildly wonky and bright and colorful, right? So we can kind of identify that, but within the context of a publishing house, their series may have very different looks and feels. So I don't think that that type of research is going to be worth it. My advice actually would kind of be the opposite, which would be, you know, stay authentic to, if you're an artist and also want to do the text, stay authentic to what's meaningful to you. You know, so one of my good friends, Phoebe Stone, is an artist and she has many, many books. You can look her up. You know, she does all of her own paintings for her books. And one of the things that her publisher loves about her is that she came with these beautiful illustrations. She had a vision and they bought into the vision, and that worked out really well for her as an author, because now she's happy because they love her. They're happy because they love her. Everybody's happy and there's no friction. So be you and find the right person to put your vision out in the world. That's my advice.
Absolutely. And I would say that if you are self-publishing, of course, you should do market research to see kind of what's on trend, what is standard. For instance, there are certain types of text fonts that you should or should not use. If you've got a picture book, really curly Q fonts are hard for little kids to read. There are certain fonts that are better for dyslexic readers. So there are certain kind of standards that you should follow, but as far as illustrations, that is what makes children's books magical, is that the illustrations follow along with the book and the style of the book. So I think there's a lot of room for that. But as far as the hard and fast, what kind of fonts to use, the size fonts, that kind of thing, as well as the size of your book trim, those are things that you really want to go and do some market research on so that you can be on trend there. All right. This one, you'll like this one, Annalisa. I have written a book that is currently 214,000 words, working with a professional editor over 10 years times. It is a World War II book. He tells me that it is good, but we need to cut it by a third to even be considered by a traditional publisher. Any thoughts on this?
Yes. My answer is yes. It absolutely needs to be cut. So in general, and Carrie, I'll share this, an article that I have on book length. I think it's actually datewiththemuse.com/book-length, but it gives the book the typical length for each genre. But in general, for most books, think 80,000 words, unless you're writing epic fantasy and then you get 120. But 80,000 words is your sort of average across the board. So you absolutely want to cut it if you want to traditionally publish. If you're self-publishing, it's a big ask. I mean, that's, I don't know if we can even make bindings that big. It's a big book with that many words. And, you know, I believe it was Mark Twain who said, you know, I would have written you a longer or a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. I forget who it is. Somebody can correct me on that quote. But the point is that, you know, economy is important to quality storytelling. And if you're taking up too much room, then you've just done too much. And it is hard. I know we have to kill our darlings. We don't like to do that, but we do need to kill those darlings in order to, the sacrifice is to a better story. Promise, promise. Less is more.
Yes, and I'll add on to that. Not only is that a heck of a book to ask people to read, but the printing cost is going to be so high that you're going to have to price that book at you'll price yourself out of the market. Right now, we're seeing that a book that is, let's see, a book that is 100,000 words, in order to give a full trade discount and still make any kind of profit, especially if you're using print on demand, you've got to price that book around $20. So we're talking double that. Who is going to pay $40 or more for a paperback book? Not many people. It just won't happen. So not only is it just a big ask for people, but it is also something that financially and as far as the market works, it's not going to do very well. Now, what you can consider is your book meant to be a series? Can it be split up? Is that really 2 or 3 books that needs to be broken up into a series? Or is it just something that needs to be cut? Do you really get to the meat and the bones quick enough? So those are some considerations as well, but that is a heck of a work of love. And now it's time to just slaughter it, I think, and cut it down quite a bit if you, especially with traditional publishers. Yeah. Even self-publishing though, that's fine. All right, you guys, it's right at 2 o'clock. I think we got through all of our questions. Annalisa, thank you for joining us. That was fantastic. Anyone who is kind of on the fence, I highly encourage you to go to datewiththemuse.com/book a call and book a call with Annalisa. Her schedule does fill up. Sometimes I have to book a call just to get on her books. And she has just got some fabulous information. And if you're at the point of even writing your book, I know she didn't talk about it much today, but one of Annalisa's really her strong points is that she helps people get over writer's block and get the darn thing written. So if you're feeling kind of stuck even in the writing process, that is something that Annalisa can help you with. And she is amazing at it. She's got lots of tools and opportunities there for people in the writing stage, as well as information on the paths to publishing. So we appreciate you so much, Annalisa. Thank you very much. Have follow-up questions, go to datewiththemuse.com. And if you have questions for New Shelves, you can always just go to newshelves.com. Thank you all. Thank you, Annalisa, and have an awesome afternoon.
Thank you.